following these guys would be easier the second day than the first day, but some big shoes to fill. You know, we start the day off with this young, slim gentleman with David's inspiring message. Then you hear from a guy who managed a battleship, and up comes the Scottish unemployed roofer to crown the day off in glory. So hope your expectations aren't that great. And I can't tell wife jokes because my wife's in the front row and she's within striking distance. So half my material from yesterday won't even be valid. You know, this being involved in industry change is hard because a lot of the time there are so many more excuses that get in our way, and we tend to allow the lizard brain that tells us don't say anything, don't do anything, just stay quiet and stay in the corner, to really inhibit us from making change. But when we look at what we've heard about already today, the idea of higher purpose as a motivator, as a rallying call, the idea of authenticity, true, transparent authenticity, be who you say you are, and prove it by actions, by words, by consistency. And servant leadership, not looking at leadership as a means of lording it over people or a means of gaining status. Leadership is an opportunity to connect with and create the next generation. And apply these to empower others to continuously improve. These are worthwhile. The trouble is we tend to think they're too far off. We tend to think that, nah, that's not really my job. I don't have the authority, or the last time I tried that, I got my knuckles rapped, or somebody laughed at me, or whatever. These things are not far off, but we have to turn the knob to clear our vision, because there are others who don't think they're far off. There are others who have focused in on them, have grasped a hold of them, have applied them, and are realizing results, benefits, and outcomes that are the antithesis of what they have perhaps been used to in prior lives. There are people within our own area of business, within our own geography, who are connecting individuals to a higher sense of purpose, and they're allowing these individuals to become more powerful, more influential, more participatory than they have been used to being. And it's happening right under our noses. It's very easy sometimes to take some of these idealistic principles and allow perhaps a lifetime of experience that has led to a feeling of cynicism to prevent us from taking the step. Some of the examples that we're going to talk about today are from the design and construction industry. That does, by no means does that limit them to that industry. These principles are applicable to any industry, to any organization, because the dysfunction that we feel is in need of great improvement in the design and construction industry is largely centered around human behavior. And human behavior tends to have a remarkable consistency to it. It is not an industry renowned for its soft skills. For those of us who do participate in it, it's not particularly renowned for that. And it is an industry that is filled with people who are very capable, very skillful, but it has fractured over the years under various forms of pressure to the point that it does not deliver as well as it should. That was one of the things that kind of fueled us in forming the Mindshift group. Was we got sick of gathering together in these informal settings, normally an Irish bar, because we need the therapy that goes with that environment. And no point looking for a Scottish bar. They don't exist because every bar is a Scottish bar. They don't need a theme. Alcohol's fine. But we would get together at industry events and we would talk. The architect would be complaining that fees haven't changed in 15 years. The contractor would be complaining that the contract documents sucked. The trade contractors would be complaining that by the time they get involved in the project, all the bad decisions have been made, and then they inherit the blame because the design doesn't. And the owners were complaining that it was late, it was over budget, it wasn't what we asked for. It was a broken record. And finally, somebody said, you know, maybe we should start taking this conversation out of the off-the-record setting and make this a more public. Because we all know there's not a project that we haven't been involved in, that we haven't said, if we had been involved differently, we could have made a difference. We could have improved that. And that's really what kind of fueled us. And it was out of that context, and you know, when you look at the context of the construction industry, it's an old industry. It's at least 6,000 years old that we've been designing and constructing buildings of various types. But if you look at change, and even if you look at society in general in the last 320 years, we had the Industrial Revolution, the automobile, the flight and the commercialization of flight, the computer, which in particular has had huge impacts since the mid-80s, both on the way we work, the way we live, and technology. Google, for all its necessity in our lives, still only 15 years old. And all that change has happened, yet if you put that in the context, our industry has actually not changed that much. A few different materials, a few different products, but our industry has not. We still tend to do buildings where we ship raw materials to site and we cut to fit and we put it together all from scratch. We have probably devolved more than we have evolved, because I would say that the relationships and the way in which we are often working together is less functional and less productive now than it has perhaps ever been. There are other pieces of evidence, other forces at work. This is a well-known graph for those people who have heard about lean before. This graph here, basically, the blue line is industrial productivity over the last 40 years. The factory type environment, manufacturing environment where lean was really practiced, the Toyota method, etc., has steadily improved over the last 40 years. The red line, on the other hand, construction, has declined over the same period of time. This is a labor graph. 60 to 70% of the cost of a building is labor. If we're not using our labor effectively, we're not using the budget effectively. You know, and it's funny, you know, you look at this graph, and I was talking about this slide some time ago at a presentation in the US, and this contractor room got up and said, look, we were starting to do really well in the 90s, and then they introduced safety. That's a little embarrassing. We stopped because we're safe. You don't think these industries have improved safety in the manufacturing environment? This is evidence that we need to pay attention to. $16 billion of wasted money due to poor interoperability of buildings. In one study of over 1,000 projects, 30% were behind schedule and over budget. That's a challenge, and you can't argue with facts. You can deny, you go, well, we're better than that. If you use us, that won't happen. That is not happening because of one organization, and it can't be prevented by one organization, because the entire design and construction process is dependent on a sequence of events and the actions of a number of different entities. Even once a building is put into use, the environmental track record isn't all that great. You know, we tend to blame cars and other industries for CO2 emissions, but the reality is a good 50% of energy consumption and consequentially CO2 emissions is coming because of the way our built environment performs, or as you might say, that doesn't perform. You know, and then some of the systems we put in place to improve the industry become part of the problem. In Northern California, there is a governing body known as OSHPD. Most people develop severe Tourette's when you mention OSHPD in California. The theory of this group is that it manages the quality and the performance characteristics of hospital buildings so that they can maintain consistency. They count the number of fasteners in a handrail to be sure that they comply. Because of the onerous nature of their approval process, they have been identified as the reason some major hospitals have been 3, nearly 4 years delayed, just because of the system that was designed to make them better. And we've had our own problems with the system trying to respond to the needs of society with infrastructure and resources that can match population needs and the needs of our children, etc. The problem is, even when we try hard, very often our projects do not go as well as we would like. Most people will tell you that every project reduces your life expectancy by at least 5 years. And sometimes it feels that way. You know, some of the conversations, when things start to go astray, all this starts. You know, oh, and then they told us, like, really? You could have told us that 6 months ago? It's always about blame shifting. It's always, and unfortunately, it adds tension, it adds to the problem. Because people start to dig in, the worse it happens. And the pressure begins to exist. And that pressure creates cracks. It begins to fracture the team. You know, and if I steal a little bit of copyright here from David, I think he's left, so I'm okay. And you're not filming. I don't mind, actually. I'm a bit of a publicity whore, so you can film all you want. If you have a slimming app on your phone, that would be really nice too, send me them. But David talked about this area of safety. When pressure fractures a construction project team, it lets danger inside the circle. And people start to get nervous. People start to get worried. And now they form their own little safe havens inside the team. And their only common bond is fear, although to call fear a bond is probably the wrong thing. Now, okay, before you all get really dejected and rush off to an Irish bar for some lunchtime therapy, the goal here isn't to depress people, but if you've read the book Good to Great, we have a good industry, but it's not great. The first step in the road from good to great is you have to be willing to identify and accept the brutal facts. Because once you do that, it's all improvement from that step on. You have to get out from the business as usual sign. There is no case for business as usual against these kind of metrics. Our professional organizations aren't earning sufficient fees. Our contractors are suffering margin erosion. Risk is being pushed downhill. That is not a business case. Get out from behind the business as usual sign. And realize why some of these things happen. This is a typical contractual structure on a project. An owner contracts with an architect and sub-consultants to do the design, and in the due course of time, separately contracts with contractors and subcontractors to execute the design. The theory is that this pleasant, collaborative, dotted line will happen as if by magic. The reality is, too often, and more often than any of us would like, the relationship is not that functional. And of course, the natural move that happens when people feel risk and threat is everybody jumps into their own silo. A silo is a tall cylindrical object with one way in and one way out, and little or no idea of how many other objects are in its immediate vicinity. And when we do that organizationally, when we do that as a team, it's virtually impossible for us to rise to greater results. You know, when you try to communicate within that, I mean, information barely survives. For this to really work and really operate, we need to find a way how to create active, ongoing, effective communication and healthy relationships between all the different elements of this team in a manner that will begin to create positive momentum. Because Projects are buildings in our world, but actually they're not. A project is comprised of living networks of people, organizations, individuals. And it's that network which will determine how successful the physical building is. Now, our industry has been increasingly presented with some opportunities over recent years. BIM, Building Information Modeling, the technological ability to literally prototype a building virtually before we get to the site, to test the integration of components, to visualize, to model, so that when we get to the site, we've actually debugged the building, rather than we get to site and then we're paying all these multiple trades to stand and solve things on site on an early basis. We can create predictability, and we can now practice, because when you build a building, you get one crack at it. But with BIM and the technology capability, and it also empowers a level of collaboration and coordination between multiple scopes. I mean, back in the old days, now I sound like my dad, but back in the old days, if you wanted to integrate a design, you had to put all your drawings, your structure, your substructure, your superstructure, your MEP, and your interior, shine a big light up through them and hope they lined up. And let's face it, I spent a lot of years as a trade contractor. Trade contractors used to rely on buildings not lining up because that's where change orders come from. IPD is the team structure that creates a different environment that leads to different motivations that results in different behavior which drive towards different results. And lean is the process whereby we focus on maximizing the value to the customer. Lean is not, a lot of people think lean is about stripping out, because they think lean is a thin kind of a word. Lean in this application is about maximizing the value to the customer by identifying and eliminating non-value add activities and aspects. It's about value maximization. It's not about thinning things down. Now, this is your organization. You come across a customer who needs a building. Oh, we'd love to work on that project. However, you're not the only one. There are other organizations that also get involved in the project. However, this is not your organization. This is your organization. Your organization is comprised of people, departments, people with different skill sets, with different contributions to what you do as an organization. And by the way, all the other organizations are also comprised of people. This is your project. It is this living network of individuals and how they communicate and what their relationships are. Are they trust-based or are they adversarial? Are they about having each other's backs, or are they about taking care of themselves regardless of the collateral damage? What IPD begins to do is isolate out the key relationship holders and stakeholders, and then create an environment where their relationships will be maximized for effective application of knowledge, effort, towards a common goal. Trouble is, this is what we often go back to when there's a problem. When things start to go wrong, we tend to hide back inside the company. And what IPD does is this idea of having a why to inspire a team, to rally a team, to create a common belief system and a common motivation is so important. And it's only when you realize the context of the industry, and by the way, our companies do the same thing. Our HR departments, our IT departments, the guys that used to tell me I couldn't have an apple. I'm one of the appleholics, sorry. But we have departments that can do the same thing within any organization that construction teams do. We become businesses within the business. We become isolated islands, and we disconnect from those that we really should be leveraging with. Marku and I spoke with them. We asked them questions. We asked them to talk about their experience and how they felt about the project. We began to see patterns. This wasn't pre-scripted. They all didn't sit in a room and feed off each other and go, yeah, what he said. We spoke to them individually, and we began to see and hear what they were talking about. And what they were talking about was the actions that they and others were taking. Right now in our backyard, in Red Deer, on the school projects, we have a sample that begins to illustrate a lot of what we've heard about today. And do it in a context of a design and construction project, which for many of us would be the last place we might expect to see some of these behaviors. We weren't able to speak to everybody on the project, just 6 individuals. I'm sure if we had more time, and if you had more time, we would have heard other, and as the project progresses and more people get involved, the consistency that we began to hear with just these 6, I'm sure will continue and will expand. Ken is the owner. Sean was part of the government body that's involved in the process. Craig from Group 2, Richard from Ferguson Glass. Interesting little connection when Jen was saying that Richard started his career in 1997. That made me go back to the Richard Branson comment. 1977 was when Richard Branson signed the Sex Pistols, my favorite band, and his entire, so just a little bit of ADD connectivity going on in my head. Lots of experience, obviously. Dean from Darrell Evans Mechanical, and Jeff from Standard West Steel. We talked to them about their actions, and we listened, and we began to hear just an incredible diversity, each one independently having great value, but realizing that these were happening in a connected sense and the exponential benefit. Craig Weber was the there is another way. Craig Weber stepped out from behind the business as usual sign. There is another way. And was relentless in looking for what that was willing to challenge the status quo and to connect the owner to other owners who had utilized these concepts, was able to educate them and assist them in their discovery as to the attributes and potential benefits of this approach. When Ken, in the early meetings, he set the stage. He set the values for the team. He set, in many ways, he was a little bit of setting the flag. And the values, one of the things that he said was, we're going to be together for 2.5 years. What are people going to say about what we did? What are we going to say about each other? What are they going to talk about? What are they going to remember? He talked about no humiliation. This is not going to be a team where people feel or get humiliated. And he talked about things like respect and teamwork and openness. And he created a vision which set the tone, set the stage, and the ground rules by which this team would operate. Also, despite the fact that he represented the owner, and in the hierarchical sense at the top of the food chain of the project, he was a leader by action, not by words. I don't have all the answers. You are the professionals. You have the skill. You're here to contribute to the finding of the answers. That's leadership. I've worked on a lot of project teams where the leader basically said, this is the way it's going to be, and basically presented a checklist. And everybody observed the checklist and did what they were told. You don't grow people and you don't establish great results if you don't pay people to think. And if you don't make sure that you remove all obstacles to that thought. Sean had the unenviable task of dealing with change at the government level. And we all know that's probably not the easiest thing to implement. Change is hard. It's even harder when you're looking at a public entity. And it's not that Sean was able to find one magic key, but what he was able to do was gently connect and steer thought processes to the extent and to the sense that the combined efforts and understanding the overall picture allowed the government to say, you know what, we are able to change, we are able to include this process and still be accountable for what our role is as government. As a trade partner, Richard stepped up, and Jen alluded to this as well, that it's not usual for trade partners to be heavily influential in a project. Now, in the 90s, I spent 6.5 years with Skyline, and up until recently, I spent another 3 years with Skyline as a trade partner doing roofing and cladding. Jen was right. It's not usual for trade contractors to have a significant impact on a project. Yet Richard stepped up, and by taking a lead, was able to create a safe environment. And by that, it's a safe environment where the other trades were willing to sit down and discuss their multiple scopes in a manner that was designed to find the most effective way to combine. Because buildings leak at their intersections. And it's the intersections of trade scopes and contracts normally. By the way, companies leak at their intersections too, so the analogy transfers beyond just our industry. But buildings leak at their intersections, and when you have a mason who's doing air barrier, and a cladding guy who's doing air barrier, and a roofing guy who's doing a roofing air barrier, and you have glass guys that have air barriers and such, it's an area that commonly creates problems. And here's the issue. If your air barriers are leaking, you don't find out till you do the infrared scan after the fact, and now trying to go back and fix it is an absolute nightmare. Never mind some of the other risks that can come from poor air barrier continuity. As a result of a safe environment, trades who would normally hold on, no, I don't want to give up my air barrier. That's mine, it's my scope. I make margin off it. People set aside that entitlement and realized that there was value in consolidating. Not only would it save money through elimination of redundancy and effectiveness, using one set of scaffold and hoists rather than everybody carry their own equipment, etc., etc. It dramatically increased the ability to ensure continuity of performance and quality of the result. But the trades had to feel safe in order to be able to have that level of conversation. And that takes leadership too. And because you get the multiple entities in the room and the different parties, I mean, normally different sub-trades on a project, all we do is slag each other off behind each other's backs. Well, Mason screwed up that again, or the cladding guys walked on our roof and filled it full of holes. We just love to do that. You put them in a room where they bring their technical expertise and their passion for their particular area, and you get diverse opinions. Sometimes the answers come from somebody who's maybe not normally doing that scope, but they've witnessed something that's bugged them for years. You know, every time you guys do that, it creates this problem. And the ideas can come from anywhere. Dean was the glue in this team. From everything that we heard, not only from what he said, but from what others said, you know, it was about, you know, don't question something. Question why we wouldn't do it. You know, why is it in our industry and many others, why do new ideas always have to defend themselves against the old incumbent practice? Why do we assume the 50-year-old practices are somehow legitimate because they're 50 years old? And the new idea, I mean, I've spent 10 years now talking about IPD. And it's a good job I'm Scottish and can handle rejection. Because people don't come running up for a hug. Every now and then, somebody will react positively, but it's a defensive message because you're constantly having to listen to people's why nots as they believe that that's the correct. You reversed it. Defend doing the old practice. Why don't you defend not doing this? Then you'll begin to realize that only by looking at all options, status quo versus new ideas, do you begin to break through. He also had an attitude that really set a tone as well. The team really appeared to look to him and the way he brought his character to the table, and his personality to the table. And he was able to influence the team in that way. And all teams need glue. He was a champion of the culture that developed as the team worked together. And culture is, there's no end culture. Culture is constantly changing. But culture takes shape when people get out of the way. And it grows when people protect it. And Dean did that. You know, the steel trade contractor, one of the things that steel contractors, I think, bring in their way of thinking that, you know, I was in roofing, so we ship rolls of material to site and then install it almost like a raw material manufactured on site. Steel has to deal with fabrication. They think like a factory manufacturer as well as what they have to do on site. And really what really began to happen is as the design was developing, there was this ability to think about best fabrication practices as well as best site practices in the light of design challenges and really break through to how can we do something better and do so with a broader way of thinking than just, well, no, we've always done it that way and no, we don't do that, and all the other business as usual things that sometimes can get in our way. It was the actions of these individuals that really made the difference. And it was the cumulative effort of them all combined that started to drive some benefits. You bring people in early with diversity. These are the benefits that we began to see. There were behavioral benefits that began to happen. Shared risk, safe environment, best for project thinking. These were the benefits that began to accrue. The relationships were stronger. You know, and the thing that really became interesting was how many times we heard the word friendship. And this is when all the cynics in the room are going, friendship in a construction project, are you kidding me? But when you have a member talk about, I heard that this person on the team was really into guitars, and I'm really into guitars, as my wife will roll her eyes at that statement. So I know what it's like to be a nerd about guitars. Another team member was on vacation and was in a store and saw a really cool guitar and emailed a picture of that guitar to that individual saying, hey, I know you'll think this is cool. Really? You weren't even at work and you were thinking about members of your team. And you were thinking about them on a personal level. Don't scoff at that. That is remarkable. Because friendship breeds trust. Friendship enhances relationships. And it's one of the reasons this began to happen. The stronger members were able to build up the weaker members. That's what normally the stronger members in a construction project exploit the weaker members for gain, for advantage, for blame. It was all about optimization as well. That became the theme. How to eliminate waste. The fact that there were no gray areas. Gray areas are notorious in construction projects. Gray areas are where people hide. Oh, you didn't put that in the documents. You didn't say that. Nobody told me that. Or it's where things fall through cracks, get missed, get overlooked, and opportunities get missed. Higher morale. That really links to the why. It's what David talked about. It's what Mike transformed in his ship. The morale is what made the difference. The morale of the team. It wasn't how well they studied. It wasn't just their practical experience. It was the morale that developed at the individual level amongst these people. You know, and what one of the comments was that this became a great environment to mentor our junior people in. Wow. You know, I can remember when I started work in a quantity surveying firm in Edinburgh, the first time I was taken out into the field, I was 17 years old. I was just told, we went to a meeting, I was told to sit in a corner and shut up. Don't say anything, because you'll make a fool of yourself and us. When you are trying to train junior people who are new to this industry how to become competent and capable in meetings and in customer-facing situations, if you have a toxic environment, all you get trained in is how to survive. You don't get trained into how to be a better professional. You don't get trained in competence of your craft. You just get taught how to survive. And the problem is, after you've had a few bad experiences, when you then experience a new situation, you tend to judge what just happened just now in the light of all the bad things that happened to you in the past. And you begin to assume that the environment's toxic. These individuals talked about fun. They talked about, I am becoming a better professional. We're talking about somebody who has many years of experience, still talking about the fact, and to Michael's point earlier, always learning. I'm becoming a better professional as a result of this process. And ultimately, that all translates to value. And perhaps the greatest value of all is the discretionary effort that morale, trust, friendship, positive relationships begins to generate amongst members of the team, where people step out for each other's behalf, where a trade notices something that would help another trade, rather than only worry about their own turf. You know, and there's other studies. 200% return on investment, an additional $22 million saved. A team that saved $400,000 from this AIA study. These benefits become consistent. Trusting and respect for relationships. Reducing construction time by 20%. Customer knowing their cost exposure early, so the unknowns and the fear is removed. Ability to make changes without being hammered for extras. Clashes and other problems being resolved in advance that would have led to delays and costs. The architect drew fewer drawings. Now, this is where the architects get a little uptight. They're like, well, if I draw less, do I get paid less? It's a legitimate question because people have been trying to pay them less for decades. So, not another excuse to cut the fees. Since when did you have to always draw to justify your existence? Design is a process of identifying issues, problems, opportunities, and responding to them. The fact that you do drawings is a communication of that design. If you're working with other professionals who don't need 92 drawings and a schedule, and only need 4 drawings, they will then do their shop drawings, submit them for approval. It's the skill of being able to understand, are they technically proficient in meeting the needs of the project, that is the design. Not, well, I put it on the drawings. It's maybe counterintuitive, but it's about value. This is another project. ENR published this article a few years ago. Interestingly enough, the same author had published an article the year before basically saying that IPD sucked and was just a big joke. And all of a sudden, a year later, this article comes out. And just picking a couple of highlights, this was a multi-million-dollar hospital project, 72% complete on site, and there were only 26 change orders. There had only been 300 RFIs, requests for information, issued. A project of this complexity would have had at least 3,000. And we all know RFIs are foreplay for change orders. So there is a relationship that leads to value as well. There is an ongoing study that is continuing to look at this concept and is also documenting some of the responses. There were 3 questions asked of these individuals. This is just one. Comparing their IPD experience with their conventional experience on schedule, cost, quality, changes, morale, and overall value. 70% of the respondents are saying it's better, and 50% of them are saying it's significantly better. These are consistent results. You can't argue with facts. You can't argue with results. And ultimately, it's better. It's better for the industry and those involved because it takes what has happened too often and it gets rid of the danger, it removes the fear, allows people to come out of their little silos of safety and create the safe environment. If you want to use another analogy, this is like the big room, where it's safe to speak up, where you're encouraged to contribute, where your opinion will be heard with respect, and it may be the catalyst to the next great innovation on the project. Which ultimately comes down to a conversation about value. If traditional models encourage organizational selfishness and individual gain and blame assignment, and on the other hand, IPD generates a move towards a collective value best for project and individual contribution, I think the first one struggles with giving value, and this obviously is the key because of the actions that happen as a result. If we look at this cast and we look at the evidence and we look at their comments and we look at the way in which they talked about the nature of their experience and how they believed it was being achieved, following these 5 kind of consistent patterns, we really begin to perhaps see value in a different sense. Because value to the design and construction industry, when people say, I need to do this because I want to get better value, most of them mean I want it cheaper. And I'm Scottish, I respect that, because we invented the concept of being cheap. Copper wire was invented by 2 Scotsmen fighting over a penny, after all. But what is value? Value is the aggregate of actions constrained by process. If you have a poor process, you will inherit poor actions. Our industry, this is a quote that's actually in our book. It was made by a gentleman from Cushman Wakefield in Dallas. The design and construction industry forces good people to do bad things. We behave badly because we're kind of painted into a corner. And consequently, we come out in a defensive way. Value isn't just metrics. Yes, time, quality, budget are important. But value is more than just that. What about beauty? Is there value in beauty? When we design and construct buildings, we're building communities. We're not just throwing up 4 walls and a roof and a few floors. We're building buildings that people play in, people live in, people learn in, people heal in, people work, create. We build communities where society lives. What about the emotional impact that our buildings have on its occupants and those in the community? What about the value of pride in what we do, what we contribute to? That's just as valuable, if not more, because there's a stronger why in the more emotional aspects of value than there is in the pure metrics. Because any fool can build you a cheaper building. The dumber they are, the cheaper it will be. It's just a simple fact. It takes skill, integrity, commitment, and an eye on value to deliver better. And it doesn't have to cost you more if you have the right approach. Value needs to be defined because it's not the same every time. It's never the same building twice. It's never the same owner twice. It's never the same problem that we're trying to solve with the building every time. Value needs to be defined and it needs to be understood because it's part of the vision that will motivate how people respond. Value inspires. There's absolutely no doubt, and I hope I'm not embarrassing the individuals who are in this room whose quotes and whose comments that I'm citing. There is absolutely no doubt that each and every one of them is inspired by their experience. And just about every IPD person I've spoken to, or a person who's experienced a project done better, they have their eyes light up when they begin to talk about the experience, as opposed to the Tourette's that breaks out when you ask people about the projects they wish they hadn't been involved in. Value doesn't leave anybody out. There has to be value for all participants. One person can't win it all at the expense of others. And value nurtures. An attitude around value nurtures the environment in which value will be realized. It protects protects the culture of the team. It becomes the glue that holds the team together. It becomes the owner who insists on respect. It relies on people stepping out of the way, checking their egos at the door, so that they can nurture the environment where greatness can actually happen. Ultimately, value often surprises the participants. Value surprises the participants because in our industry, a lot of us don't expect good surprises. And it's sad, but it's true. And the experience builds them into better professionals, better people, and more capable professionals. Which really comes back to each one of us. We need to examine who we are and what we're going to do. If you're a leader, then use your influence to bring about the changes necessary in your organization, to bring about the kind of environments and behaviors and sensibilities that we've talked about this morning. Develop your why as an individual and for your team. If you're a leader, use your influence for change. If you're not a leader, recognize when somebody has made changes that allow you to step up and act like one. Realize when there's a situation that allows you to learn how to be one, how to be a better leader. The first time I had a team reporting to me was probably about 12 years ago, and I sucked because at that particular time in my life, I was too busy trying to find my path. And I didn't devote the time because I was too busy worrying about my own future. The team that I just left was my first experience to learn how to be a leader. And it got cut short because that's what happens. But I learned more from them about myself than I'd ever learned. And I learned it quickly because we had a need to make changes. And to this day, I have never been involved in anything more rewarding. And it's the most incredible thing to begin to realize you can positively influence and grow others. There is no better feeling. So you've got to decide to check that box. Do something differently. Otherwise, today was just a bunch of people sucking the oxygen out of the room. And the example that others are showing is falling on deaf ears. There is no reason every one of us can't leave this room and do something different that takes some of what we've heard today, what David shared with us, what Mike shared with us, what this team is showing us is happening right under our nose. These are inspirational for a reason. They're needed. And there's not a single person who won't benefit and who won't create collateral benefit for others if we don't take some of this and apply it. Because with that evidence, we know the return is there. Don't wait for return. Do the right things, the right actions, make the right changes. The value will accrue, and the inspirational halo effect that you will precipitate will change your life and theirs, and the projects that we work on. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Any questions or comments? Yes?
When is it too late to do IPD on a project? You started halfway through the design, or?
Well, for true, complete IPD to be utilized, it needs to be from the very get-go. However, if you think about the values of IPD, multiple parties involved, bringing people in earlier than you would normally involve them, joint decision-making, removal of fear, and the ability to share risk. The later you introduce these ideas, the less the value would be. But it's never too late to make a positive change. Because what you learn in that one, you'll do it earlier the next time. If you always say it's too late, you'll never do anything. The later you introduce it, the less IPD it will be and the less value will accrue, but positive change nearly always makes for better results. So if you're done your design, you're late. But you're not too late, because you're now going to move into execution phase, selecting your key trades, etc. How you select these key trades could be very different than just stick it out on the street to everybody in the yellow pages and grab the lowest bidder, who is normally whoever made the biggest mistake. Do you really want to select a team that is largely comprised of people who screwed up in their bid process to be low enough to get to the table? Because once they realize what they missed, their behavior will reverse. So I would say the value, some of the values and impacts may be less. I don't like giving up. I think it's never too late to begin to apply new ideas and better processes. Who else has a question? Yes?
Going back to the study where 50% of the people who worked on IPD said that they thought it was significantly better, at least 50% of the people who didn't. So my question is, are they looking at how to increase that for the partners so that they're getting better value?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, there's two values that come from studies like that. First of all, they tell you the temperature of where everything sits. But IPD is about continuous improvement. So you're quite right, 50%, 70% thought it was better, but only 50% thought it was significant. So absolutely, in the spirit of lean and IPD and continuous improvement, the value of that study for the practitioners who are looking to get better at it is to find out why 50% didn't think it was significant.
Right, so have they found any common theme for that?
At this point, the study is still ongoing. These are results that are still information. I would think that I know there's other individuals have studied projects, specific projects. Project teams do a closeout, and one of the concepts of lean is after every meeting and after every activity, you have what's known as a plus delta conversation. What could have been better about this activity? What was great about it? You're constantly, and it's not that you don't want a bunch of whiners then moaning about the fact that the donuts were stale. You want meaningful information about why the meeting could have been better. Because continuous improvement and the identification of what wasn't as good as it could have been is no longer a threat. It's a rallying call to do something about it next time. So ultimately, these studies are not with the desire to say, look, 50% of people thought it was great. No, we got to 50%, that's a good start. Now what are we going to find out? Because the trouble with surveys is, if they're anonymous, you can't go back and say, why did you think that sucked? Because then you lose the anonymity. But there's absolutely a red flag that the study will continue to then delve into. Was it because of who they were? Was it because of something that particularly happened to them? Or, by the way, 20% of society will never think it's better. Now, that's not scientific, that's just a fact. 20% of people will always complain no matter what you do, because that's what they do. They complain. And they're very vocal, and they sound like 80% of society. That's unofficial, not scientific, but we all know it's not far from the truth. Hopefully that, I'm not a researcher, but I would expect those of us who care about it do want to know about the other 50%. And if it's not happening, I believe that you've given us a good marching order to go and find out why. So maybe in next year's event, we'll talk about the other 50% and how we've maybe shifted that needle even further. Who else? Anybody else going to comment? Last question? Yes?
This is great, and I really enjoyed the talk, but this afternoon I have to turn around and go to a non-IPD site.
That's like traveling on an executive jet and then getting the middle seat right in front of the bathroom on commercial the next day.
What can I do? What can be implemented in the middle of a project? The tenders are out, contracts are out, we're in the middle of the mud. What can I do?
Well, it comes down to, are you willing to perhaps swim a little bit upstream? Because you probably will have to. Lead by example. Be willing to question. Don't accept the adversarial stuff that often happens when you do challenge and say, you know what, just because you're shouting doesn't make you right. Just because your voice is louder than mine doesn't mean you're smarter than me. Look for opportunities to prove that the business as usual is not adding value. Look for what, you probably know what's going to happen on this project before it happens. We do become prophets to a certain degree. And so, one of the things I've done in the past is, you know what, if we continue to do this, this is going to happen. And then 3 weeks later, it happens. Now, then that's when I would go out and get a bunch of extra large I told you so t-shirts made. And then at that meeting, when they announced what happened that I predicted, I'd hand out t-shirts to everybody. I'm being cheeky, but you know what will happen if business as usual continues. Predict it. Because the fact that you predicted it may get you a stronger voice the next time you speak up. And you might have to bite that elephant off one chunk at a time. And you might have to feel a little uncomfortable. Look for backup. There's probably some other people in the room that might appreciate you stepping up in that leadership role, and you might get support from it. You'll not know till you try. And nothing will change until you do try. And you might be the catalyst that turns that whole project around, and potentially future ones that will learn from it. Little bits. You don't have to. You don't need to show up in a tutu and wave your magic wand and everything will be fine. So don't worry. It's not that bad. But little steps will make a difference. Thank you very much.